We are back, and it's exactly 3 minutes past 8 o'clock. Good morning once again. And of course, at this very hour, we get into the coffee court, the previous coffee court, as we review the state of the country's economy. What is the state of the country's economy? We shall be right back.
Welcome to the Coffee Court, and this time around we'll be digesting matters of the private sector foundation, relating them to the matters of economy. My name is Fred Makuya, and I'm joined by the Chief Executive Officer, that is none other than Dr. Stephen Asimwe, who is in charge of the private sector foundation, and will be digesting a number of issues regarding matters of economy, but asking those very fundamental, hard questions. Doctor, it's a pleasure, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Fred. Pleasure to meet our audience.
Okay. Yeah. You're an apex body. Let me first speak your take on the current state of the economy as PSFU.
First of all, the state of the economy in the context of what's happening now is not any different from what's happening elsewhere in the world. We've had two bouts of very tough challenges. The first one being COVID-19, which led to a lockdown for 2 years. And then the post-COVID and the coming in of these new global challenges after the war between Russia and Ukraine. So on the one hand, we had the challenge of the COVID time when our economy completely shut down. There was no production, there was no trade, there was no investment, there was no inflows. It led to one, total collapse of some businesses. For others, they suffered badly, they crawled, and others barely made it. Of course, in some cases, there were some new opportunities that arose. And, like for every misfortune, there are those who gain from it. But after the 2 years, it really hit us very hard. We lost money, our debt portfolio was doing badly, production capacity was terrible, there was no intake. Spending power by the majority of the Ugandans really suffered because they didn't earn. So when you don't earn, you don't spend. Of course, the exports remained on board, but because of a lack of movement, basically the entire ecosystem of the business environment suffered. Our businesses really got hit. Okay. As if that wasn't enough, when the COVID situation was lifted, the curfews and movement of people and persons and goods and services, then
Welcome to the Coffee Court, and this time around we'll be digesting matters of the private sector foundation, relating them to the matters of economy. My name is Fred Makuya, and I'm joined by the Chief Executive Officer, that is none other than Dr. Stephen Asimwe, who is in charge of the private sector foundation, and will be digesting a number of issues regarding matters of economy, but asking those very fundamental, hard questions. Doctor, it's a pleasure, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Fred. Pleasure to meet our audience.
Okay. Yeah. You're an apex body. Let me first speak your take on the current state of the economy as PSFU.
First of all, the state of the economy in the context of what's happening now is not any different from what's happening elsewhere in the world. We've had two bouts of very tough challenges. The first one being COVID-19, which led to a lockdown for 2 years. And then the post-COVID and the coming in of these new global challenges after the war between Russia and Ukraine. So on the one hand, we had the challenge of the COVID time when our economy completely shut down. There was no production, there was no trade, there was no investment, there was no inflows. It led to one, total collapse of some businesses. For others, they suffered badly, they crawled, and others barely made it. Of course, in some cases, there were some new opportunities that arose. And, like for every misfortune, there are those who gain from it. But after the 2 years, it really hit us very hard. We lost money. Our debt portfolio was doing badly. Production capacity was terrible. There was no intake. Spending power by the majority of the Ugandans really suffered because they didn't earn. So when you don't earn, you don't spend. Of course, the exports remained on board, but because of a lack of movement, basically the entire ecosystem of the business environment suffered. Our businesses really got hit.
Okay.
As if that wasn't enough, when the COVID situation was lifted, the curfews and movement of people and persons and goods and services, then the Ukraine war came in. But even before it came in, the challenge of COVID was both local and global. So you had a situation where global supply chains suffered. There was no production in largely East Asia, China, and the countries we trade with. There was no ship movements to both take and receive goods, exports and imports. So the entire logistical, transport, financial services suffered, and the knock-on effect is still felt up to now. So for instance, because of a lack of shipment, a lot of containers got stuck, and so people couldn't get some primary materials for production on this side. So that really hit us very hard. Now, as if that wasn't enough, this entire Ukraine-Russia war had a knock-on effect on global financial markets, investment, financial inflows, and obviously logistical challenges came in. So you have a problem of price increase, fuel increases, which then push up production.
Okay.
Now, with that said, when you have an economy that is heavily dependent, especially on trade, but also in terms of foreign investment inflows, stock markets, the whole mix, schools had closed, production facilities had, banks were demanding for their money. That had a huge effect on the business cycle and life.
Doctor, it's very easy to explain to someone that the reason why we are where we are now is because of COVID. That's a bit understandable. But how do you explain external factors being the contributing factors to where we are as an economy? The war of Ukraine, how does this really become a contributing factor?
Of course, Uganda is not an island. We import and export. But we're also dependent on a global financial logistical system. So when the war broke out in Ukraine and Russia, one of the things that was hit first was the oil production capacities, where we are a net importer of fuel, of oil. The prices went up. Global markets, global prices of oil and gas went up astronomically. That impacted on the liter at the station. So where you had fuel going for 3,500, it's now 5,000 plus. When that happens, immediately the transporter, the logistical elements, consumption of diesel, petrol has a knock-on effect. So the final person suffers from that because that price is added on to the consumer. So if I am a taxi driver and my fuel has gone up, I increase the price of the fares between Ntinda and the town, the city. So that affects immediately everybody adds a markup so that they can make the business profitable. So that was immediate. And so when you have a fuel markup going up, it basically translates into the added price of a commodity or a price. So for everything, for manufactured products, agriculture, everything went up and the consumer suffers. So the school says I can't buy things, firewood, food, etc., because the prices have gone up at the wholesale or retail. So the school fees goes up. So the parent suffers. Then the transport guy says, look, I'm going to add the transport costs to the fare. So me who is on the taxi or a border, I also suffer. I become the final loser at the end of the day, or I take the hit, the bullet for everything that's global, then becomes national, and then becomes local. So that's basic economics, really.
When you talk about the schools, the drivers, and all these, you are talking about your members. These are members of the Private Sector Foundation. They hold the view that it would be now the private sector to help them get out of this situation. I want to pose to you a very fundamental question now. What are you doing as private sector to manage such circumstances that seem to be affecting not just the government officials, but also your member as a CEO of the Private Sector Foundation?
The Private Sector Foundation is part and parcel of the economy. One of the things we do is policy and advocacy for our members. But it's not just our members. It's private sector players in general who are not necessarily members, but also the economic players. We have 12 sectors in the whole. We have agriculture, manufacturing, trade, tourism, ICT, logistics. All of these guys are part and parcel of this economy, and they are the ones who are hit. Now, when that happens, we take it upon ourselves as a secretariat to take these views and challenges to the government. We, of course, understand government is challenged. It's in a catch-22. They are the ones who determine the budget, taxation, and the operating environment. That's why you notice that before this budget was read, there was a lot of consultation taking place, especially the private sector foundation and now other members, the manufacturers, people in agriculture, etc. So we are very, very much at the forefront of ensuring that we do not have a collapse of the economy. Now, government is responsible, of course, for managing inflation, things to do with taxation, managing interest rates, the central banking rate, which affects the commercial banking, where people can borrow money. So we are very, very much on a daily basis engaging with the government. And yet we are a government in ourselves. We are the ones who pay taxes and receive services. So we need good roads, health services, and whatever else that is necessary to ensure that we have an operating environment. But for that to happen, we need a conducive and really an atmosphere that encourages investment and business. That enabler is two-way. We have to have almost cross-pollination with government on a daily basis, and that's what we have been trying to do. We want to thank government, first of all, for lifting this. You remember in January, the president announced full opening of the economy because we were really crawling. But that was because there was an issue whether it is life or livelihood. So the government and the president, for that matter, was working strongly on life, ensuring that SOPs are maintained, and many of our people managed to come through. Unfortunately for us at PSFU, we lost our executive director. You know, he succumbed to COVID-19 exactly 1 year ago, 21st of June. That was a life issue.
But would we be now be talking about COVID, or, given the circumstances, Doctor?
Of course, it was necessary to intervene from a life perspective, that we needed to lose less people and have many people sick. Like other countries really lost in the millions, who were very lucky, but largely due to the interventions. However, you had to have a critical balance between life and livelihood. Do you close permanently and you lose the economy? Or do you open the economy and lose life? So there was that intricate balance. Now, post that incident of opening up the economy, we needed to make the wheels move. That's why we needed incentives, and I'm glad they didn't increase on taxes. However, there are still some sticky issues that need to be resolved, and our members at different levels are trying to come in to say we need more government intervention in certain areas.
So how do we balance the boat? You have the COVID, you have the economy, which is, I don't know whether it is on a collapse. I don't know what you're taking.
No, I don't think so. It's certainly suffering, and we are not alone in this thing. I mean, economies across the continent are all suffering. However, livelihood is, we've sorted the issue. There's been a lot of vaccination, and we thankfully thank government for that. But what is now necessary is constant dialogue and intervention. They need to look at some of the laws, the policies that affect production, and not just, taxation is heavy, but we need to critically look at some of these taxes. We need to look at increasing the tax base as opposed to taxing a few, We need to look at getting more people into the formal economy, but incentive-based formalization, so that you don't punish people because they've come onto the economy.
Maybe one would say formalization doesn't solve the current circumstance.
Well, it's a dichotomy of issues, really. I think that, personally, I think that there is a need to get more people into the formal economy.
Okay.
We need to get more jobs created, more incentives. Right now, our people are challenged by high non-payment of loans. I mean, people have non-performing loans as a result of COVID-19 and some of these issues that came. So what do you do there? Do you let the bank sell your stuff? But at the same time, we also realize that banks are owned by people and shareholders who are business people. They have invested their savings into a bank to lend money so that they can get a return on investment. However, the people they have lent are suffering from non-performance of business and therefore cannot pay back as fast or as efficiently as they should. Now, that's where the government comes in and says, is it possible to get either a grant or a bigger, lower interest facility that can support businesses until they come back? And that's called resilience resuscitation. At PSFU, we have something called CHERUP, the Economic Recovery Resuscitation Program. But it's not enough. We're looking at small businesses. But that's a model we can apply with government, which has bigger pockets. But I also know that government is challenged by much bigger challenges. They have roads issues, there are security concerns, there's health, etc. It's a huge thing. But government is who? It is me and you and them. And that's where media comes in, so that we have a discussion in terms of how do we realign some of these challenges and take also advantage of opportunities.
No, that points me to, before we even jump to government, there are people who believe that private sector is their key, is where they will run for help. What are you doing as PSF to help your sector members that are hit by the current state of circumstances?
Well, I'll talk about it in different facets. Number one, we realize that we have a huge neighbor called DRC. We also have a huge business community called the East African Community, which is made up of 7 countries now. One of the things as PSFU we did was to strategically look at opening these markets to our members.
Does that solve the current circumstances?
It does in many ways, because you have huge production but which is stuck without an outlet. So people have food, they have manufactured goods, they have professional services, they have opportunities for tourism and hospitality, which can then allow members to come and take. Now, once you have an off-taker that is able to take your goods and services, then you know the business starts to move. And that's where you now say, if I'm going to target Congo as a market, what do I need? I need export credit. Because once I support, I export, I need some facilitation to do that. Opening up markets, opening up new business deals, investment. The president has been talking about doing roads in Congo. Congo has a market of 100 million people. So recently we got together with government agencies and private sector, and we were in the DRC for 10 days. We were in Kinshasa and Goma, and that market is good. But last week we were in Juba discussing on how we can increase more exports to that place. We hosted the president of Tanzania at a business summit for 4 hours. And I can tell you, PSFU, with its cohort of membership, we were able, for instance, one, open new routes to get our goods to Dar es Salaam in 72 hours, a couple of weeks and months to come.
But that's a long strategy, though.
It's not long. It's not long. It's short term. It's short and medium term.
How does that help your member of UZEA? How does that help your member of Federation for Small and Medium Enterprise? How does that help your member from the Chamber of Commerce, Kasita, Kafo, Kata, all because you are not exported?
Yeah.
How does that help?
This is how it helps. Tanzania has been taking 10,000 tons of our sugar. Who produces sugar? It's the local person who has a small 1, 2, 3 acres of sugar cane.
That's true.
And therefore, they fall under the category of micro, small, medium farmer. He has been stuck because Kenyara Lugazi and Kachira are not taking as much sugar cane as possible. So how do you, and Kakira and Kingara and Lugazi are stuck with opening up Tanzania. So basically what we did was to say, Madam President Suluhu, you people are not buying our sugar. You're only taking, we are taking a lot of your rice, but you're not buying our sugar. You're not buying our eggs, you're not buying our milk, you're not taking our beef. You are charging us $520 per truck to enter your country, and yet you are charging $120 to our neighbors.
Okay.
Open up. PSFU says, okay, since you are coming for a state visit, apart from seeing a few factories and engaging government and politicians and regional discussions, please give some time to private sector. And our president was gracious enough to allow us to have 4 hours, meaningful business hours. We presented our case, and I can tell you, Fred, one, they have promised to take our eggs, which have been stuck. What does that mean for the local guy with 300 birds, 500, producing 500 eggs a day? There is a market. 2, she has cut now freight costs of one truck entering Tanzania from $520 to $125. What does that mean? That the guy with the truck, that guys who are exporting can now effectively cut and lower costs of doing business in Tanzania.
But that's not a
3, she's taking our polls, she's reducing the costs of doing business in Uganda. It takes anywhere between 8 and 14 days from Mombasa port to Uganda. Now it is going to take you 72 hours on rail and by lake from Mwanza to. What does that mean? It means that the costs of doing business, delays of doing business, and effectiveness of doing business are going to be lowered even for the local person. So it translates directly, whether if you look at it from a perspective of cost-benefit analysis. Yes.
Dr. I'm afraid we're running out of time.
Yes.
We can expound the matters of
Yes.
What would be your parting shots?
No, the parking shots are like this. That for us at PSFU, we are not sleeping. We are going to work with government. We are going to work with our colleagues from the private sector in Kenya, in Tanzania, in Rwanda, in South Sudan, in Congo. We met the Federation of Enterprise, the equivalent of PSFU in Congo. And we have said, let's do business together. If there are roadblocks between Uganda and Kampala and Mombasa, there are about 40 roadblocks. They are charging money on every truck. We take it to the politician. There is something called the JPC.
That's what I'm saying. I am not seeing here.
No, we are there, Bwana Kuba. Every JPC now, we are now involved in Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We are working with free zones. We are saying free zones authority. You set up free zones on the border. We take our business people and create production centers. We are working with the Uganda Investment Authority to create industrial parks so that our people can move in there.
You think that's enough?
More than enough. We are saying, let our young people be trained. So we've got a facility under Young Africa Works in MasterCard. Let's get our people to get skills. Let's get them to do business. I have just come back from Azerbaijan. We want to create 10,000 jobs on business processing to get our accountants, our IT people to start doing business with people across there.
Doctor, you must be winding up.
So there is so much to do, but I think I need more time on this discussion.
Thank you very much. Speaking of course,
Yes.
that is the Coffee Court. We've been digesting matters of the private sector, whether they are still in touch. Of course, you've ably heard it from the CEO, Dr. Stephen Asimwe. My name is Fred Makubia, and this is the Coffee Court.